Which industry is one of Britain's biggest employers with products everywhere? Always has one eye on technology, needs people with creativity, logic, and above all, vision. Media, IT, telecommunications. In fact, it's none of these, it's construction. You might be surprised to hear that construction is forward-thinking and high-tech, but it has to be because it needs to keep pace with society. Construction constantly updates our surroundings to fit our lifestyles, and the industry wants its workforce to be equally in tune with the times. At the moment, women and ethnic minorities are underrepresented in the construction professions. Now, more than ever, there is a need for them to make their mark, and we'll hear from some individuals who've done just that. We'll look at career opportunities in architecture, engineering, surveying and planning, but there are many more careers in construction. Construction professionals are responsible for creating so much of our daily environment. Next time you go shopping, take a look around you. Have you ever wondered how your local shopping centre got to be there? A multi-skilled team of people would have been employed to get the shopping centre built. Before any building works can take place, the intended site for the centre would need to be analysed to find out what was underground and what the soil conditions were so that the foundations could be designed. An architect would prepare the designs for the shopping centre, taking into account how a building contractor would make these designs a reality.
Most people's perception of an architect, when I tell them I'm an architect, they say I must be very good at drawing. And when you push them further, they understand that architects design buildings. But they do a lot more than just design the buildings or the concept. They follow the building process through conception, which is generating the early ideas for a project, the concept, the design, right the way through to supervising it on site and getting the thing built.
The supporting frame of a large building like this cannot be designed by an architect alone. So, a structural engineer would be brought on board to design the structural elements.
The initial part of the design, you're thinking more about how the building is going to react to certain load pressures, how it stays in its position, how it resists loads from the people within the building, the furniture within the building, how it resists wind loads on the side of the building in a storm, for example, and that you would work with an architect quite closely to ensure that the design that he's got in mind works with the structure that you've got in mind.
As well as the structure of the shopping centre, its infrastructure would need to be designed, and this work would be done by a civil engineer.
The roles of a civil engineer are varied because you've got so many different types of infrastructure, so roads, rail, bridges, but primarily you would look at the design of these elements.
Important internal details such as lighting, lifts, escalators, heating and ventilation are designed by building services engineers.
We've actually redesigned the steels as well now.
There are various different divisions within building services, the main ones being mechanical, public health and electrical. Public health will look after domestic water services, so when you turn on your hot and cold tap at your sink and the water drains away, that all relates to public health. Mechanical side is looking at comfort of people, so heating, cooling, ventilation. Electrical is looking at things like lighting, power sockets, IT, all those sort of things that you have to plug into.
Quantity surveyors would use the architects' and engineers' plans to work out exactly what quantity of labour, materials and equipment is needed to make the project a reality and meet the client's budget.
If a client comes to us with a new build, he wants to know construction cost of that building, but also when that building is built, there is maintenance to be done. There are repairs to be done. If the building has a life of 25 years, he'll want to know how much it's going to cost the building to stay as it was when it was built in 25 years' time.
So, the quality of the building is determined by the architects and engineers, and the cost is calculated by the quantity surveyors. The third important ingredient in planning the project is time. The project timetable, which details how and when things are built, is devised by a professional planner.
Essentially, it's bringing pieces of a design together from the concept and breaking a building down into the different elements and then putting time frames to that should direct a construction team of people to how the building's put together.
For the shopping centre to be built successfully, all the construction professionals would need to collaborate, and a project manager would act as their team leader.
As a project manager, you're really looking after the client's interests on the job. So you're managing the team, and that's the whole team. So that's the architect, the consultant engineer, the contractor, planners, QS, and so on. And you're basically making sure that they talk to each other and make sure that the information's passing between each of those parties on time and to schedule.
We tend to take buildings like this shopping centre for granted and forget just how much hard work and creativity teams like these have put into getting them constructed. Whichever construction profession you work in, you can help influence our built environment for the better. Those of you who have a flair for design might be drawn to architecture. Samir Pandya discovered architecture by chance while he was at school.
I was very lucky because I kind of stumbled into architecture by doing a course at GCSE level called Craft Design and Technology, and within that there was an optional course which was building design. And it did spark an interest, and I began to become very curious about architecture as a profession, and what went into making up an architect and what the role of an architect would be. My education started at Dundee University. I did a degree there, which was a Bachelor of Science in Architecture. And it was a very technical course, and it was good. It gave you a good foundation, and I felt that it was really sort of providing me with a solid basis for understanding the kind of bricks and mortar approach to architecture. After that degree, I went into practice for a year, which was a compulsory requirement of the course to get experience before you go into the second part of the course, which is the Diploma in Architecture. Now for that, I transferred from Dundee to Brighton because it was more about developing yourself as an architect, what kind of language of architecture you'd like to use, and being more creative. It was more about creativity, and it was very enjoyable. I think the balance worked well. When I was at university, we worked on the drawing board a lot, but now, as I worked through universities, drawing boards were becoming less and less used, and computers were becoming more and more used. And in the profession today, you won't find a single architectural office without a computer in it. And most architects now develop their drawings in something called CAD, which is computer-aided drafting. But you also have to understand how to use word processing, graphic software, things like this, so you have to be IT literate. I think the range of work is sort of unlimited. You can go and work for a practice that is involved in housing, or you can go and work for a practice that is involved in education, commercial buildings, public buildings. So the scope is vast in terms of your own personal choice and what you're interested in. One of the longest projects I've worked on is a project called the Tidworth Housing Project, which is for the Ministry of Defence, and it's for providing houses and homes for soldiers' families. One of the biggest things about this project was to create a sense of community and a sense of belonging for the residents, not only through the language of the buildings themselves in terms of traditional features such as canopies, the types of bricks we use, and the general feel that they give, but also in the way the buildings are placed on site. So you arrange, for example, in clusters to create courtyards, to create a sense of a central focus or a kind of village green atmosphere. So it's very good in that respect. So what we're trying to do slowly is to build communities in the way that the residents feel at home and in the way they relate to each other, a sense of neighbourliness. And I think actually it was worked. We've got a lot of good positive feedback from the residents, and they're happy in their homes.
You want people to come and see, see what you've got.
Sure.
I've had family up now and they don't realise this is a military quarter. Yeah. With the old grey houses, you sort of stuck to yourself.
And I've got neighbours that lived as neighbours in the old houses, but we never knew them.
Right.
And they couldn't believe that we actually all lived on each other's doorsteps and we didn't know them.
Just because of the way
Just
the houses
because of the way
were
they're
laid out.
laid out.
Houses, you know, as I say, you're
Yeah.
not afraid now to go out the front and be seen in the front of your house.
Right, okay.
Before it's like, let's
Have a laugh.
let's not live here.
Right. For me, the special thing about being an architect is, beyond doubt, the idea of having a voice and contributing to your society and the environment and shaping it in a way that makes it richer for people and enriches people's lives. I don't really think of many other professions that do that so directly or make such a difference to people's lives. And that, for me, is a great satisfaction, and I have no doubts at all about entering the education and subsequently entering the profession.
If you think you're more skilled with figures than floor plans, you might think about becoming a quantity surveyor, the so-called economist of the construction industry. As a student quantity surveyor, Ruth Smart worked on McAlpine Stadium in Huddersfield, calculating the construction costs.
The major one of this stadium was all of these, they're called banana trusses. That was because they're like shape of banana. The steel work that went into this stadium was very expensive. There's a lot of concrete in this building, as you can see, all the seats. The whole structure is concrete. The seats are put on top of concrete steps. Huge, huge money. The nicer bits are things like, you know, the actual pitch and the lights and all these extras that you don't think of, which need to be priced. The line markings, everything. Everything. We have to take into account everything. Signage. It's a big project. I studied quantity surveying at Leeds, and years 1 and 2 were spent in the college learning. Year 3 was spent on site at McAlpine Stadium, and year 4 was my final year, again spent in college. It wasn't just textbook stuff, it was things like learning to build a brick wall, what construction was about, the actual physical building of buildings. Surveyors who've been educated in Britain are viewed very well overseas. And 2 months after I graduated, I started work out in Johannesburg, South Africa, which was fantastic. Lots of exposure, thrown in at the deep end, which was great, running my own jobs. I left South Africa after about 2 years and went to work in London. Whilst I was working in London, I found out I was pregnant and decided to move back north and started work in Manchester. People have said that, you know, you can't do both, you can't be a mum and have a career. But I think I've proven that you can. I became chartered June 2000. It's good in the fact that if you wanted to set up your own practice, you have to be chartered to do it for your professional indemnity insurance. It's good also because being chartered means you're more qualified and you get a bigger salary. And also, if you take a break from your career and you're chartered, it's easier to get back into your career. Teamwork in this sort of industry is very important because there's lots of different parties you have to communicate with and you have to work with. Design team, being architect, quantity surveyor, engineer, contractor, must all work together, must all communicate, because without each other we couldn't get the job done. I was attracted to the construction industry because I'd never met a woman who worked within construction, and it was a challenge to me. I would say to a woman who's a little bit nervous about joining the industry to go for it, because I think it's worthwhile and she'd love it, like I do.
If you want to design and create the networks at the heart of a country, like roads, bridges, dams and harbours, then civil engineering might be for you. Chartered civil engineer Rishmila Mendis started her work experience on several bridges in London.
I do like bridges. I think they're fascinating structures and they're quite individual with characteristics of their own, and just fascinating how they're made to work. I first started working on bridges during my summer vacations from university, so I did a 4-year course, so all 3 summers I worked with the same company and they were involved with a lot of bridges. And I was involved in general inspections of their bridges on the Thames. So that would incorporate travelling in a boat and going under about 5 bridges for the general inspection, and then for principal inspections we'd actually go into the bridge just to look at the general condition of the bridge and then file a report and send it off to the client. You do get to see the secret life of the bridges in terms of going into the towers. Let's say of Tower Bridge, you can go inside there, or where they raise the bridge you go into the bascule. So it's quite nice, you get to see lots of different things, parts of the bridge that you wouldn't normally. I guess the best thing about engineering is just the variety of work. I mean, you've got bridges, structures, airports,